Welcome, everyone, and thank you for coming today. We are very lucky to have a chance to meet at the very end of the year. A huge amount has been happening, and even though I tease him, King has been central to a great many things, not only in Japan, but internationally. OpenChain is very lucky to have board members like King and Chloe from Honor. Chloe's actually my favorite, but King is number two.
Yeah, you're number two in my favorite.
No.
Wait, you're first.
And Chris, Chris from Oppo obviously is
Number three.
Yeah, number three. Today's meeting will be informal, so please feel free to talk and share ideas. But we will have a briefing. I want to try to give you new and useful information. So this is a strategic workshop. I'm with the Linux Foundation, so at the beginning of every meeting, I show you this very bright antitrust policy notice. This is just basically for US regulation to say the type of things we talk about. Ooh, my pencil is sticky. Gross. Anyway, the antitrust policy can be found on the Linux Foundation website. And if you have any questions, you can ask our council. Let's go to the fun part of the day. Our agenda is 5 things, and you don't have to worry about reading in too much detail. I have sent the slides and I will send them again. But basically, global update, internal information about OpenChain, information about a compliance summit we just held. We're going to have an analysis of the China situation. We're very lucky to have some good friends here, such as Gao Shu from CAICT, hiding in the corner, who will present China market. And the reason we will look at OpenChain, international standards, international event, and China market is because then we will discuss the future, what opportunity and what challenge exists for next year. So this is about the big picture and then practical discussion. What do we do? The first thing, though, is I want to just welcome CIC, the latest OpenChain partner. It's really good to have a new partner. We're nearly finished the year. It's December 14th. So I think CIC might be the final partner of this year. And it's very notable how organizations like CIC have come to OpenChain to work together. So thank you very much. Now, we will dive right into the main topic. And I'm trusting our photographer here to take records and send them to me because you're in the correct place to take good photos. Keep doing it. I trust you. Let's look at the global update of our ISO standards. This concept of making international standards for open source is actually a revolution. 7 years ago, we had nothing for formal management. Now we have ISO standards. And it's because of companies like Honor, Huawei, and Oppo that we've managed to do this. The long-term investment of energy and strategy took us from open source being chaos to open source being permanently managed. The OpenChain project has seen a lot of good numbers this year. We've been very, 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 very busy. Not as busy as King, though. I saw his flight schedule, and it's insane. It's like every 3 days.
More, less than 3 days.
Yeah, it's just crazy. But he must have incredible air miles. So that's good. So we've been doing well. On our website, many more organizations have asked to be listed as using license compliance standard. Many more organizations have started using the new security standard. By the way, those increases, the conformant listed is not the total. That's organizations that come to us and say, please put my logo on your website. Later, I will talk about the actual numbers. They're very, very, very high. We've seen an increase in certifiers that are official. We've seen an increase in service providers that are official, vendors, tooling, official, and legal providers. In every direction, we have seen more people support the ISO standards for compliance and security. We've doubled the amount of standards we maintain because the security standard is new, and we have future proposals of 3 new standards. This is a lot of things have increased. Specifically, talking about license compliance, I think we had a good year. We saw the standard go deeper and deeper in procurement. And procurement, contracts for purchasing, is where ISO standards last. When people include our ISO number in their supplier contracts, when they include our ISO number in supplier negotiation, is when we create the long-term future here. And our ISO standard for license compliance has been more and more visible in procurement activity. I told you that there's 109 organizations that came to us and said, put my logo on your website. I use this standard. There's a lot more organizations around the world, but it's very nice to have these logos. As you can see, it's from every industry, every continent. It is a very good group. I'm really happy in particular on this layout. You'll notice that we have Toyota, we have Honda, we have SAIC, we have Hyundai. Many of the world's biggest car companies are using OpenChain and talking about it. Very recently, Honda announced that they're using this standard so that Korea Telecom and smaller companies like LSware and Bobble AI. Honda's great because we have Toyota #1 in Japan, #1 in the world, and Honda #2 in Japan. When they say they use a standard like this, their suppliers start using it. It goes deeper. KT, of course, is a big telco in Korea. It's much smaller than China Mobile, naturally, but it's big in Korea, and it's very, very good to have them use the standard. One thing I wanted to show you is market research from Synopsys. In the year when our ISO standard was released, there was a much higher level of license compliance problem around open source. It was 65% of open source code bases had license compliance issues. In 2022, we saw a reduction of 12% to 53%. Obviously, 53% of code bases with license compliance issues is bad, but it's less bad than before. And this is our target, gradually reduce the problem. 31% of large German companies are using or plan to use our ISO standard for open source license compliance. This is research that was done by PwC. They are an official partner. I have asked Deloitte, another official partner, if they can do a global survey in 2024. We are an open source project. We have a limited amount of money to do huge surveys. This survey involved calling over 1,000 companies and spending an hour on the telephone with each company doing a survey. So we need big companies like PwC to do that, or rich companies like Huawei. He looks at King. I'm just playing. Okay, let's talk about security. So the security standard is very new. Does anyone know the background to the security standard? basically people started using our license standard for security.
Mm.
And we had security experts come to us and say, I understand why. Many of the processes for license compliance are similar to security. Check inbound, track, monitor internal, track, check outbound, track. Similar, but not the same. And the security experts said, how about we make a sister standard? We keep it very similar, but we make it focused on security. So we did. We started in 2021, we finished in 2022, and we put it through ISO in 2023. This standard was supported a great deal by Lockheed Martin, a US defense company. It doesn't make it a US standard, but basically they gave us a really good expert to help review this who knows security. Now, this standard is very new, but we're already seeing important adoption. We have seen some great companies use it. And if you use one of our standards, it's easy to use the other. A lot of the processes are the same. So officially, this standard is scheduled for ISO publication this month. They keep changing the exact date. Until recently, it was scheduled for last month. This isn't because of a problem with the standard. ISO is just very, very busy and does not have enough staff. The standard is done. It is approved. It is out there, and it's available on our website. We'll do plenty of PR about this as soon as we're ready. Probably we'll announce it in the next week or two. I'm checking with my board. Anyway, the first company to say they're using the ISO version is Kakao Bank. It's a Korean online bank. It's similar to WeBank. It's the largest bank in Korea by market value. It's really nice to have banks adopt something like our standard because banks are very careful and very highly regulated. They're not the only one. We've had 6 companies adopt this brand new standard very quickly. The ones that probably matter to you will be LG Electronics, BlackBerry, and Kakao Bank because they're large, they make a lot of products, or they're in a highly regulated industry. By the way, can you buy LG televisions in China? They're really good. I love their OLED TVs, but they're so expensive, right? Yeah, but they're really good. Okay, I'm going to tell you a story. This has nothing to do with our work. In Japan, I'm permanent resident of Japan. And in Japan, sometimes service level is crazy high. And one day I was looking at an LG TV in an electronics store, and it was a showroom model. It had been used a lot, and OLED, if it's used a lot, is damaged. And I was looking at it and thinking, finally, a price I can afford. But it's a showroom model, and OLED gets damaged. And the man from the store came to me and said, if you buy it, LG will come to your house and replace the panel. And I thought, that's crazy. But they did. I bought it and LG came to my house and replaced the panel with a brand new one. Anyway, Japan is insane. Service is great. That's how I got a cheap LG television. End of story. Thank you. Okay, back to our standards. Our standards are available to everyone free of charge, and we also make self-certification free online. So most companies in the world use our standards and they use self-certification and they use our free self-certification. This means that companies very quickly can use an ISO standard. Of course, they can also get third-party assessment or certification. So we have all of this movement because we make it easy and we make as much as possible free. Now, I mentioned a little while ago that many companies use our standard, but we don't know who they are. It's an international standard. Someone can use it without telling us. So we made a new way for companies to tell us, oh, we're using a standard. And recently, companies have started coming and filling out the form and saying, oh, yeah, we're using the license compliance standard. Oh, we're using the security standard. If you are a company that is using the standard, please consider filling out the form and letting us know. We love to hear. Okay, I wanted to tell you a little bit about the partner ecosystem. At the beginning of this meeting, I said we have a new partner, CIC. Who are the other official partners? Well, we have a lot. We currently have 14 tooling or automation providers, people who can do scanning or sell you scanning. Various companies like CIC can help with automation. We've got XMirror represented at this table. They do that as well, and other companies like SecTrend here in China. We're very lucky to have a lot of international companies as well, including the largest providers. We have an astonishing 13 official third-party certifiers, including CAICT, who will be speaking soon. As you can see, we have a lot of third-party certifiers in China. And that's really good because you have the largest supply chain in the world. But we also have some really strong international ones. We've got 30 service providers around the world that can do things. We only have one in India, but it's Wipro. So it's a huge, huge, huge company. We've got 24 legal providers, ranging from individual lawyers like Maggie Wang, based in Shenzhen, I think. Yeah, she's great. She used to be Huawei a long time ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've worked with her for maybe 15 years. And we have big, massive law firms like Osborne Clark, and we have small law firms like JBB. Tons and tons of providers, big ecosystem, lots going on. Now, I said the standards are being used. That's good. Lots of support infrastructure. That's good. I also wanted to flag other areas where exciting things are happening. For example, we do free online training courses. And we were actually very surprised. When we released the training courses, very quickly, companies like Continental, Bosch, KPMG started to use our online courses for their internal training. That's nice. It's good for us because it means that they will be closely matching the ISO standards. So for example, I think KPMG is not OpenChain conformant yet, or they didn't tell us, but their developers are being trained in the same processes we want. So this helps the market. And we have been providing a huge webinar series to educate the world. We're at 57 webinars so far, plus 7 extra about tooling, covering everything from overview of open source initiative to very specific things like AI compliance. By the way, the open source initiative is working on AI too, and I will talk about AI later. That's all of the news. I just wanted to stop there and see if there's any questions. Okay, everyone's just like, enough news. Stop it. All right. When you do something like build international standards, you have a big community. We have more than 1,000 companies in our community. And you have a governing board that makes the rules. We have 25 multinationals in our governing board, including Honor, Huawei, and Oppo. And things like formal decision, new standard, official work group, that's made by the governing board and the steering committee. The governing board is the steering committee. On the 6th of December in Japan, they met and discussed the future. And that's actually important because we're now making the ISO standard for open source license compliance. We're now making the ISO standard for open source security assurance. These are the people who decide the future of those ISO standards, and all of the other material, like the training that is being used by KPMG, or the community meetings that bring Japan and Korea together. This is a lot of text. Don't worry, you don't have to read it. The short version is that our international community was looking at updating our standards. Many people were using our standards and had ideas. Now, we are an open project. We are an open standards project. So if someone has an idea, we listen. So we spent more than 1 year listening to lots of ideas about license and security standards. We did it in the open, on open calls, GitHub, mailing lists. In fact, everyone could turn up and give ideas. This is very different to traditional standardization, where a small group meets. Now, having community ideas is not the same as making a new standard. All of that goes into a proposal, and then the steering committee looks at it. And the steering committee can say yes, no, maybe, whatever. So update to security, update to licensing, proposed. There were also future proposals about what if we made a new standard for open source contribution? What if we made a new standard for SBOM quality? Those proposals were not ready, so the steering committee did not look at them. They were too early. It was not complete. But the steering committee looked at updates to licensing and security. And again, this is important. If the steering committee decides to update the ISO standard, your global supply chain changes. Okay, so this is huge. The license spec has actually been locked since 2019, and it became an ISO standard in 2020. So it's 4 years old, and it's had 4 years of feedback. Lots of comments came in that time. Nothing changing too much, but lots of comments. And basically improving language for non-native English speakers, improving some clarity, etc. It's on GitHub, and you can see the future draft with this QR code. That proposal went in front of the steering committee, and they had a look at it, and were thinking, do we accept it or not? Exactly the same happened for security. Now, I just said security is brand new. So you might ask, why are they looking at updating security? It's brand new. The reason we looked at it is because part of ISO, Working Group Subcommittee 27, Information Technology Security, checked our standard, said, we like it, but they had lots of ideas. And most of their ideas were add new things, increase scope, blah, blah, blah. Obviously, with the first version of the standard, we didn't want to do that. We wanted to keep it very narrow. But we said to them, thank you for your ideas. We will look at them for the next version. So we started looking early. And that doesn't mean we'll update it early, but we started looking early because of them. And other people had ideas too. You can see the ideas at this QR code. It's on GitHub. So that was interesting. The steering committee looked at all of this, the ISO standards, and came to some conclusions. And like I said, this is important. It will change the supply chain for tens of thousands of companies if we update the standards. Basically, the steering committee said the proposed updates seem reasonable. They don't really change much. Big changes were all rejected. Small adjustments, okay. But The steering committee said no rushing. What they want to do is to make our period for public comments much longer and our freeze period longer. So actually, most of next year will be for public comments about the updates. So there'll be plenty of chance for everyone to go and look again and double check. The steering committee said we do not want to update the standards often. The steering committee said, basically, we think updating the standards once every 5 years is a good idea. And that means for license compliance, an update in 2025. So actually they said, great ideas. Thank you. We love you, but slow. So yes, we will update our standards, but not right away. We will have a huge process for public comments and we will take our time. We will probably stick to updating every 5 years. Maybe we will update the security standard earlier in a few years. Maybe we'll do it in 2024, for example, because the security market is changing rapidly. So license compliance is not changing rapidly. We don't need to update the standard, maybe security. So those conclusions can tell you two things. One, use the current ISO standards. It's not like they're going to change quickly. Two, the steering committee will make sure there's very large public comment period for any changes. So even if you will get a change in 2025, you'll basically have a long time to comment. So no surprises, nothing too exciting. This makes us much closer to a traditional standardization timeline than an open source project. We are an open source project, but we're using the same long timeline as traditional standards. This is very different to other projects that move faster. There are good reasons to move fast in some areas, like our sister project, SPDX. They released SPDX 2.2 in 2021. They're releasing SPDX 3 this year or early next year. That's a lot faster than us, a lot faster. But they are doing software bill of materials. That field is implementation, how to record software. We are business process management. We're not about how, we are about what. We are very high level and we take our time. Okay, does anyone have any questions about that? Because obviously looking after the ISO standards is a big job and it is for you. So your ideas and opinions matter. If you don't have any, that's fine. But it's very important that we ask if there's any question or concern. Okay. You will have at least 6 months next year for the public comment period. And then there'll be a freeze period of 3 months where if you find a serious problem, you can tell us. Okay, so public comments, share ideas. Freeze period, oh my God, something will break the whole supply chain. Don't do it. You will have 9 months next year to make comments. Now, that's the really formal stuff. And there's one more part of this event that will be me talking and it's boring, but it's more fun, I promise you. We just had an event in Japan called the Open Compliance Summit, and many cool people were there. We had Lotus from Open Atom who snuck in late. Sorry. It's okay, I'm just teasing you. We had King, we had Chloe. This conference was very international. It's held every year in Japan. It's organized by the Japanese companies. And at the event, we try to bring many, many international experts together. This is not like a typical conference in China. In China, the conferences are often very big. This conference only allows 100 people in the door. And you cannot register, you can apply for an invitation. Most people don't get in. No students, no engineers who are just interested, no journalists. This is for high level only. And it's held under something called Chatham House. In other words, no recordings. It's private. Who said what? So this is a high-level legal conference about licensing, security, export control. It's sponsored by some companies. In this year, Ericsson, Google, and NEC sponsored it. It's not an expensive conference. It's only 100 people. And we keep it very simple. So this conference is 12 or 13 years old. And we had some problems during COVID because the planet broke. So it was very hard to do an international conference. Last year, we started to reboot it. And we had a one-day event, but it was so-so. Most people still could not travel last year. So we just couldn't get the international audience. But in 2023, we did. And the goal was to create a space for global leadership in open source legal. If you are experienced in open source legal matters, you'll know there's two worlds. One world is essentially a volunteer community, people who maybe are coders and they have ideas about licensing. The other world is corporate. It is lawyers. It is export control. It is security people. This conference is the corporate world. This is not about politics. This is purely about business. And we wanted to make sure that we had a place where business was represented perfectly. We actually had 119 people registered. I said the limit is 100, but we found that if you accept 120, about 100 turn up. We had only 4 canceled, and in practice, we had around 100 in the room. Now, again, this is a difference, I think, to most conferences we see in China. Over 22% of the audience were speaking or on panels. So that this entire environment was created to feel like a big workshop. We had people from countries, we had people from regions, we had all types of ideas. Very international event. When we opened it, we talked about how international it was, and especially how good it was to have many people from China and Korea. I don't know how many people from China. It was more than 10, right?
1, 2, 3, 4.
You escaped. I was looking for you on day 2.
Equipped.
You vanished.
I just found Bruce.
Oh, yes, you invited Bruce.
Is he
Yeah.
here?
You were
Toy.
Yes.
And okay, from X Mirror,
Yeah.
he is a speaker. She's speaker.
Yes.
Yeah.
Chiyue gave a great speech. She was on stage in day 1 and
Afternoon.
yeah.
Day 1 afternoons. She has a speech on. So
Yep.
Gary.
Yep. I think that was your first international speech around open source, right? Yeah, it was good to have you there. You're one of the newest members of our community. Thank you. I was thinking it must have been terrifying because we had people opening the conference like Dirk Hondale, Linus's best friend, and probably the most experienced person in licensing. The audience was crazy experienced, and you got to have that as your first speech. That was cool. You're welcome. I told her all of that before she got on stage. I was just messaging, this person is really important. That person is really important. No pressure.
he is really impressive. And another guy is Alex.
We had Alex from SecTrend, and
SecTrend.
Alex gave a very interesting presentation.
Mhm.
We had many people come from China. And the question was, what is China doing? And Alex gave a great presentation with lots of numbers about the China market. And that helped a lot of international people, I think, realize the scale of it, especially Americans. Because he did comparison numbers about the size of the market and engineering and so on. So it was good. And it was just wonderful to have everyone there. But I guess the key point about this conference and why it was important, and I mentioned this at the very start, the market has changed. We have an ISO standard for open source license compliance. We have an ISO standard for security assurance. We have an ISO standard for software bill of materials. So the same people who were in that audience, a lot of them are the people who started these things. So it's very good to have them talk about the history. Like Dirk got on stage and talked about 20 years of license compliance management. Yeah, you can see the full schedule online. It's at this QR code. The conference was private. The schedule is available. And each day was packed, but you probably can't see it from the back of the room. Every talk was short. No one got to do marketing or blah, blah, blah. They had 15 to 20 minutes to get to the point and get off stage. This is important. This meant that we had focused delivery from everyone, and we had people coming and thinking, as a senior person in the field, what can I say in 15 minutes that the other senior people will find interesting? Day one, we had, for instance, Bloomberg talking. We had Ericsson on how to manage intellectual property. We had a lot. Day two, equally crazy busy. We covered things like the future of software bill of materials. We had information coming from, for instance, Korea, how the international standards are working there, and more and more. It was very fun. And we had a very active audience. This slide shows a bunch of people. I'll just pick one. At the bottom is Mary, Director of Open Source at Volvo. She's running the first Geely OSPO, yeah, outside of China. Now, naturally, companies like Zeekr have OSPOs, but she's running the first Western Geely OSPO. And, on the middle right, we have a very senior executive, Mr. From LG Electronics. He's way above the open source level, but he's the sponsor of making sure their open source leadership is strong. So we had a really cool event. And yeah, look at that person on the left.
Yeah.
I recognize that person. Yeah. You're welcome. And on the top there, that's part of our Japan community, talking about how and why they made education material. I don't know exactly the situation in China, but in Japan we have many small companies in our supply chain, and many are tiny, and they have no resources for automation. They have no resources for OSPOs. These are really small companies, 30, 40, 50 people, and they're supplying companies like Toyota. So our Japan work group has been building special education material to allow these companies to go from zero to working in open source with no money and no OSPO. It's very cool. That went well. This event, I think, was pretty useful, even though my good friend from ByteDance ran away on day 2 to talk to Bruce Perrins instead of me. By the way, how is Bruce? I haven't seen him for years. How's he doing?
He seems full of energy and he climbed up the Great Wall.
He climbed a great wall. I'm actually interested that he's not young anymore. Okay. Bruce Perrins did an interview of me in 2007. It was one of my first interviews as a professional in this field. He was a very gracious and nice gentleman. So I don't know who knows Bruce Perens. He's a co-founder of Open Source Initiative. He's one of the creators of open source as a concept. So he's really old. Sorry, Bruce. Don't listen to this recording, Bruce. Now that's my overview. This summit is probably worth going to. And this is always in the winter. I was just talking with King about perhaps we could have something in summer in China.
Next year?
Yeah, maybe we can do something similar here and have a closed or quiet, effective summit focused on compliance and security. We have no details yet, but my personal opinion is something like this works. Very small, very focused, high-level people only, and try to get P-box. No gifts or dinners. We actually did have one gift. That was a mug. Yeah. Okay. Just pausing here. Does anyone have any comments or questions? Yes, that would be great. You can do all the work. I will take the credit.
We'll be happy to, because, one of the reason for I can do that is to let everyone know that the OCS is totally worth it.
Oh,
So,
that's good.
Yeah, so, I would recommend, or should I speak English? Chinese?
Maybe Chinese.
我们这次可能去这个 OCS 这个，就整个会议的气氛，然后他请过来的人，大家讲讨论的内容，真的确实我觉得非常的实用，而且是很有价值。大家其实就是有条件的话，还是真的可以去参加一下。然后正好刚才那个盛也讲到，其实国内可以再办，那反正开放原子是蛮愿意去做这个支撑，因为我们也有一些其他的活动，我们可以为他介绍，然后想说能够一起来做一下这件事情。
So OpenAtom
I
think
think-
this.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, so OpenAtom went to this OCS and they think this is very, very valuable and useful to the companies and developers. So they want to help us to make these activities in China. They have many resources and activities to do this.
That'd be good. That'd be great.
If we can cooperate.
If it's
Yes.
really, I think it's really, really good.
Yeah.
If it's really.
I'm making my proposal.
It would be very useful because we have one event in North America called the LF Legal Summit. We have one event in Japan, the Open Compliance Summit, and there's another event that happens in Europe called the Legal and Licensing Workshop that's run by Free Software Foundation Europe. So if we could have one in China, that would be a nice completed set of a lot of the world.
Okay.
Yeah,
Chinese folks really need that.
that's something we will definitely have to work on together. Let's do it. Yeah. That'll be fun. And speaking of China, it's about time we do our analysis of China. So, would you like to talk about China a bit? I thought so. Okay, I'm gonna rip off this. Here we go. Oh my God, the engineer tied everything down. If you could move my laptop over towards her.
Oh,
It's just
Oh.
recording.
okay. How many people online?
I know that.
Yeah. Look, they need an adapter.
Any competitors online?
Oh, no. The computer is in this room.
That's good. That's good. Keeps you focused.
几个？有几个人线上？
while she's setting up, I just wanted to let you know, if you're not part of our OpenChain lead chat, we've been very busy there, and we recently decided that OpenChain's community will decide future ByteDance policy for the app.
Yeah.
Yeah.
有没被 Q 了红
King
色里面
King is going to be our lead dancer.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is official project policy for China.
Yeah.
Anyway, over to you.
Okay, and thank you for giving me a chance to introduce what we have done. And actually, this last we have shown on May this year, but it's in Chinese, and I translate it to English. But I want to speak in Chinese. Sorry.
That's great. I'll read your slides.
然后我就把那个现在当前我们看到国内的开源的，尤其开源合规和安全的一些情况，给大家去做一个介绍，包括院里的一些开源工作。首先是这个，就是院里，我先说一说我们做了哪些工作啊，就是信通院是工信部下面的事业单位，那我们其实做了很多标准化和产业研究的工作。那当前其实我们已经做了。一个国家标准和15个行业团体标准。那国家标准已经进入了这个报批阶段，应该会在明年上半年就会正式发布。那整个标准体系其实我们觉得还是比较全面的，涉及到这种开源的一些合规的内容、开源安全的内容。包括这个一些工具 SC 工具的一些要求，一共是有相关15个相关的一个标准。下面是我们一些合作的一些合作伙伴，以国内的企业为主啊，包括今天在座的很多企业，像我们和这个华为、字节、欧拉，包括神境等等，都有很密切的合作的这样一个关系。那可以说在国内国内逐渐去做这个产业和生态吧。这是一个是我们做的这个工作。那下面其实有一些数要给大家去做介绍。这个数是什么呢？是基于院里前期的一些标准化的工作和产业的调研。我们其实今年上半年有一个数字是非常有意思的，我们是针对国内的金融、通信、汽车等等重点行业去调研了它的开源治理情况。我们想知道它开源做的怎么样然后把这个数据做了一个展示。这是后面就是要给大家去说的这个数字啊。这个我们在今年上半年已经发过了中国开源的一个治理的调研报告里面的一些核心的一些数字。这是里面调研的这些结果啊，就是给大家稍微的看一看，就是涉及到刚讲金融运营商、汽车、工业等等多个行业。那企业的话也涉及到一些中小企业和这种大中型的企业都会涉及。那第三个数字我一直在讲，第三个数字是比较关键的，是什么？其实在说大家到底用了多少的开源。从这个数字里大家可以看到，其实有12%的企业使用开源组件的数量是超过10万的。而这个数字，据我们今年，因为我们持续还在更新数字，明年上半年我们还会发新的，还会继续增多所以开源的这个组件的使用量是非常大的，远比我们想的要大，因为它包括组件的信息在里面。那大家关注开源更多的主要就是一些知识产权的风险、安全风险以及供应链的一些风险那回过来说，那既然开源使用量这么大，那现在开源治理的一个情况是什么样子的呢？我们也做了一个调研，主要调研的是什么呢？就是基于刚才我们15个国标行业团体标准里面一个最重要的开源使用治理能力的这个标准，要去考察我有没有做这个相应的这种开源治理，包括你有没有一些组织架构，包括有没有一些规章制度，包括你在全生命周期有没有做管理。涉及到这种软件的这种测评选型、运维、持续跟踪，有没有去做？一共涉及到20几个维度，我们做了调研。那我们把大家做的比较多的这个数字给大家列出来了，就是在国内，国内的这个市场，我们调研的100多家企业里面，大家会做什么？就我们列出了这个 top 10的这个动作那多数的企业，就国内有一个特点，关注开源治理。它其实是出于安全的考虑，所以91%的企业，都会说在面临一些这种安全问题的时候，它会进行相关的一些规划，乃至退出的一些这种操作。那第二个就是，针对这种88%的企业针对这种开源这种软件供应商，会通过合同去约束它开源治理的一些要求。 那么这是第三个的话，还是涉及到这种安全就是针对这种安全的这种漏洞，大家会发现之后进行持续的跟踪。那么87%的企业，那可能会通过这种版本升级的方式去处理漏洞，当然还有一些其他的方式，我们记录了这个可能采取比较多的这种方式。那85%的企业都会说我已经登记了存量软件，这个数字其实让我很吃惊啊，就是因为我们觉得做存量软件登记的工作量是非常大的但没有想到国内就是我们调研的过程中85%的企业其实已经在做这个事情了。那82%的企业每年会开展1到2次的开源培训。那么82%的企业其实是有相应的这种企业级或者部门级的一些制度，其实从管理制度的角度来说，也在逐渐去做。那剩下的话还有一些就70%多的企业会建设相关的这种平台，配套文档，同时有一套这种相应的这种选型的模型。所以我们可以看到，从我们前期的调研情况来看，虽然开源的使用量比较大，但是其实大家针对安全和合规的一些主体内容都会采取相关的一些这种动作吧。那除此之外的话，我们基于调研进一步整理。这个数字跟刚才数字不完全一致。这个主要是基于我们前期评估的20多家企业做了进一步整理。那大家在开源治理的过程中，有哪些痛点以及做的不完善的这个地方啊？当前我们这个调研的企业过程中，就是大家虽然说安全合规都会去做，但其实还会有一些点，就是第一个，整个开源治理的层级并不高，就是我们发现很多开源治理处于项目级，就是说我这个研发团队要去做，基本是就是这个情况。那其实就有这个超过35%的企业是没有专门的这个 OSPO 或者是开源的一些战略规划的，也就是说它整个开源治理的这种战略层级是不够的。这是第一个。那么第二个的话，就是整个我的这个治理的这个体系，刚才已经介绍了70%多的企业有相关的这种制度，但是更新频率并不高，就是它没有周期性的这种更新的这种机制这是第二个点。那第三个点，刚才还有一个数字，我刚刚讲，就刚才70%或80%的企业都会做存量软件的登记，但是定期做存量的这种梳理以及它这种规划动作其实并不多。它登记完之后，可能更多后续是通过一些新的安全事件触发，我做一些这种全量扫描。所以但多数的情况下，它周期性的这种存量的这种扫描的工作，其实只有不到20%的企业开展，就很多它其实只扫一次做了登记。后面的话，针对一些安全事件，我做这种增量的一些登记，但周期性的存量登记，其实只有20%的企业不到再去做。然后第三个说完了，那么第四个的话，就针对第三方软件的这种管理，刚才讲，多数都是通过合同义务来去做约束的。那其实我们还是要去鼓励大家去做这种，他提供 SBOM 的一些清单，包括做一些检查，但其实只有20%的企业在去做。所以我们可以看到国内的企业针对开源的这种治理安全合规的一些建设，还是有很多工作要去做的。那接下来稍微说一说，就是我们跟这个OpenChain 这边的一个合作，这个也列了的照片，对。然后这个院里是作为这个OpenChain 的这个首家的国内的第三方认证单位，刚才善也去做介绍了，我们是在21年到现在其实也有2年多的时间，再去推动 OpenChain 在国内的这样一个应用。那我们其实信通院去推这个事情有一个很大的不同，也给大家去做介绍。就是因为院里本身我们自己是有一套标准的，而 OpenChain 它其实对标了2个 ISO 的标准。所以我们做的事情就是把国内标准跟国际标准做对标，所以我们推的是这个双评估。那么一方面符合国内的行业的这种监管要求，软件开源供应链的这样一个行业标准要求，另外一方面它其实是符合 OpenChain 国际标准的这样一个要求。我们把大的方面，包括整个制度、人员培训、交付物的一些检查的核心的点去做了对应，大概是这个情况。然后整体标准内容大家都很熟了。我就不展开说了，就整个这个包括这个OpenChain 的一些要求，以及我们这个开源供应链的标准要求，其实有很多是一致的主要就是涉及到一些这种入口的管控以及交付物的一些风险确认那这里面右边跟大家说一说我们在推动国内市场过程中 针对 OpenChain 的一些这种国内应用的一些感受。就是我们整体感受来说，大家其实整个人员的安全合规意识是在逐渐加强的。包括交付物的安全检查，其实是相对有一套机制的，但是它自上而下的体系建设其实是不够的。就是包括我们发现有很多企业，其实它这个交付物是会做安全检查或合规检查，但是它其实没有一套完整的管理体系机制。这个是我们在评估过程中的一点感受吧。然后另外的话就是这个是我们目前，在这个 OpenChain 国内推动的这个企业的这个评估的一些情况，包括中兴、超聚变、中国移动、阿里，包括这个还有一些这个外企都在参与我们的一些这个相关的一些工作。那整个评估的这个流程，这个我们会定期发证书，这个证书就是会在我们的一些会议上去发。然后最近的一次的话，我们是在下周会发新的一些的这个成果吧。那整个评估流程的话，其实我们就会去企业内部对标这个 OpenChain 的这个检查的一个要求，会去检查它的这种管理体系的建设情况，整个引入管理、外包管理、这个商业解决方案的一些管理的一些情况，以及最后交付物的一些风险确认。所以大概是这个情况。然后最后的话就是跟大家稍微说一说，就是院里的话也会持续跟 OpenChain 建立这样一个良好的这样一个互动关系吧，持续推动这个标准，包括刚才介绍的这个新的安全的标准在国内的这个应用和落地。那可能像明年的话，我们会重点跟汽车的一些行业的企业会去做这个落地的一些交付，大家也可以去关注。那么我们也希望能够更多参与这个 OpenChain 的一些活动，包括培训、跟踪新的一些标准的情况。大概就这些。
It's exciting to hear that BYD and Zeekr are going through your certification process. Sorry.
Who is next? Is open it up?
Well, this is going to be Lotus. Would you like to say a few words? Please have Gopi's seat. He's not here.
Yeah.
And you're more interesting than Gopi.
Yeah,
Poor
of
Gopi.
course. Eager to copy.
By the way, Alex, we were just giving credit to your presentation at
Okay,
the
thank you very
Flag Summit. Yeah, some very nice
It's
numbers.
pity you were not on site to hear it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You know, some guys had reached out to me through my LinkedIn account,
That's good.
and they would like to know some details about my technology. It's pretty, have this meeting in.
It's a good networking event, and we were just talking about making a similar event
In China.
next year.
Okay,
Yeah,
perfect.
let's see.
Okay,
So-
so I have prepared my slides in English, but
Also Chinese.
Oh, you okay?
not necessarily, but I will let you know. I will let you know. When I want you to hear the real important thing that I would love you to know, I will use English.
Okay.
Great.
And but to shorten the time of my speech, I'll quickly go through my
Of course.
the brief introduction of our foundation for the coworkers here in
Sounds
Chinese.
great.
Okay. 就是今天thank you Shane for inviting us and give us this opportunity to bring the whole foundation and the practices we have done to this audience.
I can
And,
say the same to you for working together these last years. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And 所以我就快进到我们快速把基金会可能国内在做的一些事情，也向各位同事、各位朋友做一个简单的一个汇报吧。因为这个 slides 也是从我们的 BD 的部门那里快速抓过来，然后赶紧的稍微做了一下整体的一个翻译，就是可能给大家一个印象，或者说大概能知道基金会这么几年。就是我们是2020年成立嘛，这么几年大概做了一些什么样的事情，然后大概想做什么样的事情，然后整个这个过程中呢，我们也希望就是能跟国内的各方的这个力量，大家能够一起来把开源这个生态做得更好。整体来讲呢，开放源自它的一个整体愿景，现在是
写的比较大啊，就是繁荣开源事业，然后共享开源价值。整体上呢，我们其实可能是也承担了一些有一点战略性的一些使命和这个定位吧，就是说希望能够成为我们在中国整个开源生态的这样一个孵化器、连接器和倍增器，然后从整体上去推进我们国家在全球的这个开源生态贡献中间的一个整个贡献的一个数量和质量。然后总体上我们现在可能在优先去做的事情是我们把这个开源项目的一个孵化平台做好，另外一个就是发挥好我们作为国内的这种慈善机构的这样一个作用，去提供这个开源相关的一些公益性的服务。整体上呢，基金会现在的一个整体的组织架构大概是这样几层，就是首先作为一个在国内作为一个慈善组织吧，基金会它是由理事会进行治理，其实也类似于 Linux Foundation，他们这样就是由 Board of Directors 来决定这个基金会内的就是最高的一些决策的事务。然后在技术方面呢，我们也单独成立了。可能由各家的这个捐赠人以及行业内的这个大佬们组成的这个技术监督委员会，叫 TOC Tech。同时呢，日常的这个运行工作会放在基金会的秘书处，也就是可能现在我们所在的一些部门，秘书处下面可能会分为研发呀，然后综合这个法务，然后业务发展和这个项目的运营，就是各个部门其实是给项目来提供一个整体的支撑服务的。那可能包括营销的运营，然后这个治理的一些支撑，然后包括导师的一些服务，还有就是开发者相关的一些服务类型。同时基金会也在重点去做他们的这个项目的一些 IT 基础设施，就是就项目的共性的一些东西在做 IT 基础设施。在整个生态的一个发展上面，也是会有相应的这个资源和人员的一个投入的。这是在这个基金会本身的一个层面上，然后面向社区的话呢，我们也是类似于参考这个国外的开源项目的一个治理方式，就是通过吸引各家的这个共建单位，大家成立一个开源的工作委员会、项目的工作委员会来做这个整个项目的一个开源治理。基金会层面的话，可能就是刚才讲到的，在项目层提供他们这个关于治理上的一些建议意见，然后会提供单独的这种财务的资金账户，然后大家可以就是针对这个项目进行捐赠，也可以由项目自己就是各方来，通过他这个治理组织的一些章程以及成员自己来做这个整个项目的一个自己治理，就是包括我去采购哪些服务啊，我可能要做一些什么活动啊，或者是颁发一些什么样的这种奖励之类的。大概是这样，然后项目之下，工作委员会之下，它会单独设这个项目相关的这个技术委员会，然后营销的品牌的委员会和project management committee，就是大家那个项目本身的一个管理委员会。当然，这个也是根据项目的不同情况在做一些这个提供不同的这种结构。就是也不是说每一个项目大家可能都要有这个，可能也会根据项目那个来划分。目前反正就是因为项目也在不断的进来，我们也在抽象这个过程中间，就是尽量能够形成一套我们自己国内的这种开源项目比较适用的一些可参考性的模板吧。目前呢，基金会已经有的这个捐赠人和贡献人，就是大致逻辑上其实跟海外的基金会也是差不多的。在白金层面是有这个已经有了15家，因为还有一家现在 Intel is joining us as a platinum
Oh,
on the way.
congratulations.
Yeah，然后我们也 and we are also exciting about having a real international. Maybe I shouldn't say real an international donor to join us and
Right.
look into the governance and make this
It helps change the
Yeah, whole
system.
governance. Yeah,
That's
yeah.
that's good. It's great.
是，然后我们的就是包括我们的黄金、白银的这些捐赠人也都是整体加起来，我们大家现在大概也是40家左右，40增加的40家以上的这个 donors 和 contributors，包括这个机构高校类。目前已经在这个
通过刚才提到的，就是我们 TOC 准入的这个开源项目，大概也是有40多个，包括来自于刚才展示的有百度、阿里，然后腾讯、华为，还有就是我们麒麟也是有个项目也是在捐赠中的，就是也非常感谢这些捐赠人以及我们国内的这些企业吧，在积极的往这个开源生态里面做一些支持和贡献。然后刚才那一大块就是我们讲的，就是开源基金会在项目层面可能要做的一些基础的事情，这个部分我们也是在不断的去整体提升能力，这个过程中也希望就是国内的厂商也好或者企业也好，能够给我们一些这个支持和尝试有一些协作的方式。另外一个大块就是基金会可能在对外做的一个活动方面，目前基金会可能会有3类活动，一块是我们就是基金会自己做的，然后比较大的年度性的一些活动，那包括我们就是可能今年算做的比较大的是那个 OHS 就全球开源峰会，然后今年就是明后天马上要办的那个开发者大会，这2个以后会是基金会就是长期会举办的这个活动。在这2个会上呢，法务也都会就是主导2个论坛，就是都是跟开源的合规和这个法律相关的一些论坛。比较确定是应该会在这2个年度活动上是一个常驻的这种保留节目，到时候也希望就是能跟各位有所进一步的合作，也欢迎大家就是随时来参与和 comment。然后还有一块是我们在跟高校展开一些这个相对具体的合作，包括就是我们的这个校园行，目前也是今年启动，然后现在落地合作的这个国内的高校，包括像北航、清华、北大他们这些，就是也已经落地了有50多所，我们是包括在高校里去成立相应的社团，然后给他们提供相应的课程，去做这种职称类的这个服务，然后。人才培养这块也是基金会的一个比较重要的一块工作。另外还有一块也是重点面对高校的，就是开放原子的开源大赛。然后这一块的话，现在也是在进行中，有大概几10个赛道，现在是赛题和整个的赛程在进行当中。可能主要介绍基金会的这一层的这个活动吧。然后这一块的话，我理解是非常欢迎大家参与的。还有就是除了在基金会层面的话，刚才提到的我们在项目层，其实每个项目的治理组织他们自己也是可以去传或者说自己去发起相应的这个活动的。那可能比较大的，就包括我们也是明天就要举行的 Open Euler 有一个 Summit，它会做一个比较大的一个这个主论坛、分论坛的这些活动。然后 Open Harmony 他们也是有他们自己的这个 developer 就开发者日，然后中间也是包括有技术和合规的一些活动。其他就是我们也会跟像Git 跟开源中国或者 CSDN， 然后 InfoQ， 然后是否这些社区的媒体会做一些合作性质的活动，还有包括 CCF。Okay, here's the thing I would like to know. Next I will introduce some three projects that initiated by the legal department of the Open Atom Foundation, and that's where we are also focusing on the compliance part and the legal issue part. The first one is called Consensus. 我们叫它原意识。Basically, it's a long-term translation project for translation of useful materials from English to Chinese, or maybe from Chinese to English, because we want to, bring some consensus from doing translations. And one of the important part is for translation of open source licenses. And we are now doing the mainstream, or let's say popular OSI certified licenses. And we have published the translations for MIT, Apache 2, and GPL v3, GPL v3. And we are still working on that part. For the first part, we will finish the popular licenses first, and then we may move to some other important or separate, how to say, 特殊 for specific purpose like the hardwares.
Right.
Yeah, even they are not certified by OSI because we want to, bring some,
Yes.
promote the understanding of open source licenses.
That sounds
That's-
good. That
uh,
sounds great.
And because that part, we don't think there are too many people focusing on that part. And basically,
So
yeah.
if this license isn't identified by the
OSI.
it should be called open source license. I didn't say.
Personally, I think it's arguable. Maybe we can talk about later. But I think when we say a license is a open source license, we think it's conformant with the open source definition, right? The certification by OSI, I don't think it's a prerequisite, but it's a very good endorsement and very useful how to say support
Validation. maybe.
validation,
Yeah.
Yeah,
for
it's,
that part.
if I remember correctly, it's only recently OSI has begun returning to their process. For a long time, they
Yeah.
didn't really have
Approve.
yeah,
Yeah,
they didn't
yeah.
have the people, I think, for a while.
yes.
It's only
yes.
recently they started again.
And actually, in I think it's in April. I'm sorry. In April, when I attend the SF FE.
It's really
That's a
hard.
good job.
It is really hard.
That's a free software Foundation Europe licensing and legal workshop in last I think it's last April
Yes.
in Sweden. The OSI, I think it's Palma Chestek, who is I think the chair of the OSI licensing panel. She's oh, I shouldn't talk about that. But let's say他们可能对就是 OSI 对认证这件事情，认证许可证这件事情，他们其实现在也有一些内部的意见和那个事情在有保留吧。所以我觉得可能我们不一定非得把这个事情绑死在那个上面，因为我们其实希望大家都对整个开源的生态里面可能出现的各种类型的许可证，就是这个东西是个怎么样，有的时候你也许是需要一些参照的，而不是说只用那个 OSI 认证的那个许可证就认为那个才是正统或者怎么样。
I was
Sorry.
No, I was going to add to that Stefano Mafulli, the executive director, and I were chatting, and he was saying that he hopes the review process will increase its activity in the next year or so. But he identified it as something that had been moving very slowly for years. So it's something they need to do. But reading against the open source definition seems like a useful thing.
Yeah.
By the way, the middle council, that's Navia.
Yeah.
She is so less serious than that in person. She's always smiling and laughing. This is fake advertising. She's too serious in
But
this photo.
she provided that picture for us.
Yes.
Yeah.
I know Navia for so many years.
And she's very professional from.
She's great.
Yeah.
She's great.
And that's the review panel, review experts we have selected from the community,
Yes.
a local community, yeah. Because we think they are competent in both languages and the understanding of open source.
Yes.
Okay, I'll go quickly. Yeah, and for apart from that, we are also doing translation of judgments from English, important English cases, and from America, from like I think we would also do French. Yeah, we also have
Yes,
French
yes.
and German cases. Thank you, thanks Shane for letting for introduce me to Till.
Till Jaeger.
Yeah.
In
And,
Germany.
Yeah, he also show us the list of cases that he collected from the whole German
Yes.
jurisdiction, and we are doing some of them, and we are trying to sourcing other German speaking lawyers.
Yes,
You know,
I
to-
can
to
find you some.
translate and review
Oh,
the translation.
Yes, this is brilliant. It's a
Yeah.
lot of work. It's very
Yeah.
hard to translate a case.
Yeah, it's very difficult. And we are also have translated one of our typical cases recognized by the Supreme Court of China
Oh, good.
in relation to open source, which has been also been regarded as a milestone case into English.
Very cool.
Okay. And we also are focusing on the translation of books in regard to licenses and legal issues in regard to open source. The first one is from recommended, I think it's recommended by Zhenhua and translated by my colleague Vera Liu.
Heather's book.
Yeah. And we're also are planning to translate the compliance tutorial and guide provided by FSF. Yeah. Because for the new part, the most difficult parts for
Yeah.
open source compliance is GPL. So we're also
So the
Trying to
first
do
book you
that.
translated, The Open Source for Business by Heather Meeker.
Mhm.
Heather is a very old friend in open source, and she's unique because not only is she one of the first people to describe open source,
Mhm.
she's also someone who has been a lawyer, a venture capitalist, and she wrote one of the new non-open source licenses. So she has the widest experience of the field compared to most people. And whether, people agree with her or not, there's no doubt she has a great deal to teach. I think Heather's great. I love her work.
And her work is good because it's very concise and clear for even for
Non-lawyers and so on.
non-lawyers and non-practitioners.
By
Yes.
the way, interesting point, and I want to get Heather to do a presentation about this.
Mhm.
What license was it she wrote for, I think, MongoDB or something?
Elastic
SS
license.
Oh, Elastic license. Yep,
Elastic.
thank you. She wrote this license that is regarded by many as not open source. And it's interesting because she told me that she wrote it with the opinion that it should be open source. And I'm very curious what she meant. So I'm hoping to get Heather to do some webinar for us.
That would be very great.
Let's see.
Okay, and we'll also do translation of some key reports, and that will be bring your attention. The first and second one is all about OSPO, provided by I think Linux Foundation.
Yeah,
Yeah,
business
and
value of
also
OSPO.
and also by Open Forum Europe.
Open,
And maybe next time we can have something from the OpenChain.
of course, OpenChain is brilliant.
Sure. And actually, we thanks for your OCS this time. We get in touch to Kate Stewart,
Yes.
and we are also considering doing the extend the translation to SPDX as well,
That sounds
or
really good.
standards as well. Okay, that's for the translation project part, and I'll go quicker. And we also do some online courses, and also Zhenhua is one of our teachers and be very supportive. The courses would be mainly targeted at IP lawyers and counsels, in-house counsels who has no experience or knowledge about open source before, because we were trying to convert them to the open source, turn their attention to the open source field would be much easier for us to just educate the developers to know or to understand how can I do open source compliance. And we also realized there are a lot of already a lot of educational materials for the developers and the decision makers so we want to be a little different and make some materials there to fill the blank. But as I mentioned, but all the three projects are for long term, so we are also updating these courses and to maybe targeting at much more different people. Last time when I talked to another teacher from I think it's a Shanghai college, and she's working on the campus, our campus activity, and she said because she has no idea about the open source compliance, and she does not know how to explain that to to her students, so she she watched the online courses for the time and time again, and to prepare her educational materials. So I think maybe next step we may get more focus on that part. And the last project I would like to mention, and that's why I mentioned we should do something together, is for the OS Heart, is 新纪元, and actually it's a saloon for professionals. It's also specifically targeted at the professionals, including lawyers, including in-house counsels. Now we're having like a monthly meetup for the legal professionals, usually set up on Friday, doing online and offline gathering to, usually we'll have one guest to make a presentation, and then we have open discussion. And in that, basically it's a closed door discussion, because we want to get some occasion, to discuss the real things or real problems about open source and about the compliance we have today, rather than the big conferences that everyone making a presentation and listening. So we are it's quasi Chatham House rules applies, and we are very welcome if any experts would love to join, and hopefully next year we can work with Shane to do some OCS in China.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Yeah, and okay. That's all.
Alrighty, thank you. Now I saw we managed to get one of our very special people in. Oh, Gopi's here. You made it.
Yeah.
You're alive. I was wondering. For now only.
I think we need to introduce Gobi first.
Yes.
Yeah, so maybe a lot of people from this in this room not recognize Gobi. This is our first time meeting each other.
Yeah.
Yes. So we are in the same team.
It's your first time meeting?
Yeah.
Wow.
Absolutely. So
We spoke on our phone, but
my name is Gao Kun. Yes, Gobi. Nice to meet you. He is in the Canada Research Center Institute, and he is a engineer focused on the software engineer capability build in our Canada Research Center. Yeah, right. Okay. Gobi also the SPDX maintainer. He is very active in SPDX project. This time he represents SPDX in the Open Eura Summit the day after tomorrow. Right? Okay. So maybe Shane reserve a topic for you.
Yep.
Yeah.
We're gonna have some space to talk about AI and SPDX. But before we do that, we need to have emergency coffee. It's over there.
Oh,
Well, it's been an hour and a half.
Yeah,
We
that's
will
great.
die. So we'll have a little bit of emergency coffee, and then we'll come back and we'll continue our discussion. One thing I wanted to highlight for you is there's so many things to discuss. Like for instance, in the EU, they just passed. If I can turn this screen, they just passed the CRA,
Oh, yeah.
and the negotiations are complete. So now the Cyber Resiliency Act negotiation is complete, and we're about to have here, yeah, 24 hours to report exploited vulnerabilities. This will help change open source quite a bit, right? So this means we'll have to see exactly who will be responsible for this. Now, the good news is I'm from the European Union, I'm from Ireland. Whenever the European Union decides to do something, it doesn't happen. It's going to take at least 3 years for this to become a law. It has to pass the European Parliament. It has to pass the European Council. So the only thing that's really happened is that the negotiation is complete. And now it'll go in front of the Parliament, it'll go in front of the Council, and there'll be votes. But we still have to pay attention to it, and we have to think they negotiated that there'll be 24 hours to report actively exploited vulnerabilities. Is open source excluded enough that projects are safe? Because there's very few projects that can move that fast. There's very few projects that can do all of the paperwork. So that's why we're interested in the CRA in open source.
Next session, they mentioned China. The restriction from the product from China.
Yeah,
You see, that's the next section.
here we are. Yeah. Yes.
What does that mean? Why China?
Well, because we're in the middle of a trade war and everyone is fighting.
Why? Why they mention cybersecurity and they mention China?
Everybody knows the reason.
It's actually,
But this is a EU.
Yeah.
It's a EU law.
Yeah. Actually, I think Politico is writing very much from an American perspective. So honestly, I think the chance of China being picked on with this is very low. The EU has no stake in perpetuating a trade war.
We call it a 宿命题. Don't explain. It's hard to explain. But I think everybody knows the reason.
Yeah. And what's really cool is that we do have plenty of time, and the reporting stuff is going to probably not affect open source. The last negotiation I saw, they were getting better and better with open source. So I think we're probably going to be okay, but we do need to invest time into this and other things. What was it? The problem with all of this websites asking us to accept cookies, that's thanks to EU regulation. Yeah. Anyway, that type of stuff is important. We're going to have many things on our plate for next year, but right now, coffee, and after that, let's scope it to AI and focus on that. So let's take a break for a little few minutes and grab the coffee and tea over there. All righty. How do I grab
How's the
this?
trip?
It was good.
Good.
A little bumpy.
Did you all the flight today?
No delay, but a lot of turbulence coming in.
Yeah, definitely.
So the plane was having a very interesting trip. Well,
Storm here.
it was bumpy.
Outside is beautiful.
It's so pretty outside. I took some nice photos. I'll have to share them later. I'll see if I can get this full screen. There we go.
A lot of people come here. Almost 30, I think.
Yeah, it's bigger than I expected. So
You're
yeah,
so famous right now in China.
temporarily.
You're a superstar, rock star in China. Shane.
Thanks to King. He's doing all the work. I'm just getting the credit.
Awesome.
Hello, Shane.
Oh,
I'm Scott. Thank you to respond me. I'm Scott, and I worked with Brian and Dog in Hyperledger. Yeah, now after that I work for a company, and now come back to open source domain. Good to see you. Yeah.
Welcome back.
Thank
I
you.
know Brian for many years.
Yes.
He's a very nice gentleman. He's one of the original people in open source,
Yeah.
many, many years. So it's good to have you here. And I hope you find it useful to network with our teams.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, actually, the China telecom institution, they also follow the rules and the policy of open source companies, open source communities. Yeah.
It's super, super good news. So we'll probably have For those online, we're going to restart in about 2 or 3 minutes. The delay is that everyone's getting coffee and is very happy to see each other. But bear with us. Yeah, a couple of minutes and we'll be back for the open discussion and especially AI. All right, everyone, we're coming back. So everyone, you got to gather around. We're going to have AI and Gopi's going to talk soon. Maybe. I don't know. Just a second. All right. I'll go and ask people to come in one more time. Oh, they're coming. Good.
Well, happy to meet here.
Everyone, well, networking is important. We need more time for networking. You can try. Alrighty, we're going to kick off again. We're going to talk about AI. Everyone's talking about AI, though we particularly will have some useful things to say. When it comes to AI, there's been a lot of hype in the US, especially recently, but for many years, I know China has been doing leading stuff in AI. Companies like Huawei have been working on AI management and governance. So what I want to do now is to focus a little bit on how we work together between China, North America, Europe on topics like AI. One part of that will be Gopi destroying the entire conference building. The other part of it will be more practical. Okay, first of all, you know that we've been building business process standards for open source. We built license compliance. We built security assurance. There's a discussion. Do we need a business process standard for AI compliance? AI models and data sets have different type of licensing. Some are open source, some are not. Data is different to software. The big question is, how does a company use AI technology, use AI data, use AI outputs, and manage that? So the OpenChain project will be launching an AI study group. The AI study group will explore if a business process management specification or other topics around AI are useful for us to work on. Now, I mentioned before that we are very high level in OpenChain. We are focused on the what. How do I manage open source license compliance? And because we're very high level, we say things like, have a software bill of materials, and then we stop. We don't do the how, we don't do implementation. Other people do implementation. So there's a sister project of ours called SPDX that does implementation around software bill of materials. They are focusing on the screen sharing not working part of life. No, they're focusing on how you manage to do aspects of practical compliance management with software bill of materials. And the exact same thing is happening with AI. They are talking about how do we manage AI? What do we do in this field? So while we are just about to do a study group about the really big picture of, how do we potentially do AI business process management, SPDX is already working on AI bill of materials. So we're doing an unusual thing here where I tell you we're launching a business process management study group for OpenChain to look at if OpenChain makes a new ISO standard. But on the implementation side, there's already stuff for AI. And this is part of the evolution of SPDX, which covers now not just AI, but other stuff too. And all of that stuff is, of course, awesome. I'm just trying to share the slides. Bear with me a moment. I'm sharing them to our friends in the meeting room. There we go. I'm going to steal Lotus's laptop.
Thank you so much. So my apologies, I made this slide with Google Slides because I was collecting slides from multiple people. And so this is PowerPoint, so some slides will be skipped. So work with this, but if it is not, I'm just going to skip it manually. So first of all, thanks everyone for giving me this opportunity. What is it? what's SPDX? A little bit of introduction. I'll try to describe from where water profiles in 3.0 and kind of dive into AI and dataset profile
In 15 minutes.
in 15 minutes. Okay. So, and it first started as a single package documentation standard where it was about how to capture all the information in a packet in a standardized fashion. And then we evolved to representing compliance use cases, and slowly around 2015 we got around to representing security use cases also. And finally and then in 2021, because the standard was gaining a lot of traction and there needed to be access and international standardization, SPDX became an ISO standard. And since then, we've been and as it became an ISO standard, everybody wanted to use the ISO standard, and there's a lot of different formats in which the SPDX can be represented. So format interoperability became a key thing of focus for 2022. And in 2023, because now that SPDX has grown really big and there's a lot of information, there is some names were a little confusing, and it had a lot of complexity. SPDX 3.0 is an attempt at like reducing the complexity, having a more elegant structure, and being able to represent the newer and emerging software like data sets, AI profiles, securities, and having a light profile. So one of the key things about SPDX as an SBOM standard in comparison with other standards like, let's say, Cyclone DX, is that SPDX is an ISO standard, much like OpenChain. And the spec is freely available to download, and all the updates are always on the update. So SPDX as a standard, the ISO standard, which is the 2.2 version, can already represent all the minimum elements that are outlined by the NITA, NTIA for what should compose of a software bill of materials. So just for the record, I'm sure everybody knows, but I'm just going to say it for posterity. Software bill of materials is just a ingredient list of what are the packages, dependencies, and everything that's available in your software. It's basically a glorified ingredients list. So by going through this SBOM, we should be able to trace every package that is a part of the open source software. So this minimum standard was set out by the US government that all software should have at least these fields documented. And SPDX can do this and much more. So currently, SPDX is being supported by all of these companies, and any other company or the open source project who wants to use SPDX to represent their SBOM are welcome to do so. And the signing up process is actually very easy. And right now, just to give an overview of who are all using this SPDX, SPDX has all the open source, many open source softwares, software as service providers, basically anyone who writes software and has to ship software and be aware of all the vulnerabilities, or make sure that all the information that is required to trace all the individual elements are there, can use SPDX to represent the software. So this is the part where, as I said, the slides are not skipping, so I'll skip it myself and go here. So diving a little bit more into the SBOM itself. So software, as every one of us is aware of, the software lifecycle is complex from design.
Can we make a simpler graphic? Every time I say this one, my brain switches off.
Next time. So bearing with the complexity of the graphics, if we have to boil it down, the SBOMs so software can be in different stages, can be developed, tested, can have this source material, and it keeps going on, right? Like, and it's a cyclical process usually. And SBOM is supposed to provide a means to track all the components in all these different stages of software lifecycle. And there are many different SBOMs that one can write. So when you're designing your software, the elements that are available at the design time can be represented with the design SBOM. And a source SBOM is created directly from the source code of the software. And a build SBOM is, as the name is during the build time of the software. So the different SBOM types gives you a view into the different slices of software development, and all the information on that particular slice can be effectively captured. And so, the skipping actually worked this time. Okay, so now with that in mind, I'll kind of go over how we are evolving to SPDX 3.0 right now from SPDX 2. And these are the key things that we are trying to do with 3.0. So with 2.2, we were able to represent all the software dependencies, but it was a little, let's say, complex. And there was a lot of feedback that, like it had a steep learning curve of how to write SPDX. So first thing we want, and there was a lot of new use cases coming up, like especially AI and safety and security use cases. So one of the first reasons for moving to 3.0 is to be able to support the security and safety critical application compliance requirements, and then to be able to represent the AI, ML, and the datasets which are becoming part of software itself. And now the capability to represent them needs to be there. And we also, provenance of software was also becoming very important, and it needed to be represented. And then one of the other things that we want to do, as I said, was to simplify. And I'll show you how it's simplifying with the new idea of profiles. So yeah, right now, the SPDX 3.0 spec, everything is being transformed to a markdown structure where things are classes, properties, and enumerations. And each of the component has a metadata and description for each type of the element. And all of this can be represented across multiple schemas and multiple formats, and everything has a schema validation. And the idea right now is to decouple different types of software. Say, for instance, if you want to represent AI software, you have a core software, core SBOM, on top of which you'll add an AI profile. So different types of use cases get their own profile. So the specific fields will go in the profile. And if you are someone who never has to write an SBOM for AI, you never have to know all the details that is about AI, because you will not be using the profile. And the idea to decouple is so that the barrier for entry is lowered. And yeah, so this kind of concisely explains the relationship changes that is. So before this, in 2.3, each element had a relationship component which can connect to the other element. But now relationship is an element type of its own. So every element can be linked to another element or a profile through a relationship element, and these relationship elements become descriptive in and of themselves. So this way, there is a complete decoupling between different elements. And as I was saying, there are different profiles that are now being added on top of to the SPDX, and these are the various profiles. And each of these profiles have a working group, and we are very close towards like the release candidate 1 is already out with all the different profiles, and we are soliciting feedback right now. And all the profiles, the elements in each of the profile, or the classes and the properties in each of the profile, are available in the GitHub. And if anyone's interested, you guys could try it out. And yeah, and one of the other important things that I want to bring focus to is there is a licensing profile now. Instead of representing the licensing details as a part of the huge SBOM, licensing profile adds on top top of the software, and it has richer fields to describe licensing. And similarly, AI and dataset profile, which I'll be talking a little bit more about. So how am I doing for time? Okay.
1 minute, 12 seconds. No, I'm kidding, I'm kidding.
Okay.
You have 1 minute, 12 seconds and a half.
Challenge accepted. Okay. So AI and dataset profile is the profile that I lead maintain. Sorry, I co-lead profile is that we need to be able to, AI has unique characteristics that is not necessarily present in traditional software. And for AI, it's very important that we capture the process of and the thought that went behind some of the decisions, in addition to just capturing the dependencies. Say, for instance, this was a study that was recently done by Stanford. And what they did was they took a lot of these recent AI models or the large language models, and they kind of tried to analyze in respect to EU AI Act, how compliant are they? And the result is they found that many compliance was not followed, which is a shocking finding in and of itself. But to do this, the authors had to painfully go through each of the documentation, how different models were built, and all the white papers and the gray materials available there to be able to do this analysis. And in the future, if someone has to ship these models, doing such an analysis every time is infeasible. So having a profile that captures enough information that will allow different interested parties to be able to do compliance in an automated fashion is key. And that's where AI bomb comes in, or the AI profile helps. AI and dataset profile helps. So AI profile is a profile that adds on top of the core software to describe just the AI specific elements. So this way, you don't have to know about all the vulnerability profile details. You don't have to know about the security profile details. It's nice if you know, for sure, but to just describe AI profile, and all the specific properties are added on top of the core software. And now I'll just quickly go over the specific properties that are in AI profile. So we borrowed the supplied by, download location, package version, primary purpose, and release time from the other profiles, because it made no sense. These details were required, and it made no sense to reinvent the wheel. So some of these were inherited, but specific to AI profile, there are several fields there. I will touch upon a few key things that is important for compliance. So standard compliance field attempts to capture right now what are the standards that this given AI software tries to comply to. Say, for instance, if the software that you build is compliant with EU Act, you can specify that. And there is a field for information about training, which is very important because during training, a lot of data transformation happens software. And these data transformations can or cannot be compliant to the dataset's license sometimes. Say, for instance, some datasets don't allow you to re-represent the data in a different format, but a training of a model might be doing that. So information about training attempts to capture the process of training itself so that these details or nuances can be obtained. And there's also a field that tries to capture if sensitive personal information is part of the model. And model explainability field tries to capture if the model is explainable itself, which once again traces back to EU AI Act, where there is a requirement that when AI systems are used to make decisions, their decisions need to be explainable. So if the decision is explainable or not is being captured here. And autonomy type. So how autonomous this system is, which is once again a part of the EU's AI Act system. And finally, the safety risk assessment field tries to capture it with the traffic signal protocol. What is the safety risk that is involved? And there should those are the key fields that are tied to compliance in general, but there are also some other fields that tries to capture captures the other aspects of the model so that the things like reproducibility, transparency are enabled. Say, for example, hyperparameters and the metrics decision threshold kind of gives you an insight about what are the evaluation criteria used, and if the evaluation is fair, and what are the biases that exist, and information such as those. And we hope that this profile will enable transparency, auditability, and traceability of AI software. And moving on to the dataset profile. So AI and dataset goes kind of hand in hand. But why the decision behind having two different profiles here is the dataset can be an entity of its own. And traditional software products can also use datasets. So right now, the AI profile and dataset profile are connected by a few key relationship types called trained on, tested on, validated on. So these profiles exist separately, but they can be linked together through relationship types. So once again, SPDX dataset profile or data profile is a profile that adds onto the top of the core profile, and it describes the dataset that was used to train the AI software. So for the dataset, there is a whole host of new issues, particularly when it comes to compliance. And this is kind of one of my favorite topics too. A dataset's license, right? So we had a talk earlier about licenses being translated into Chinese and stuff, right? Like, so these are OSI licenses. There's already a clear specification of what is allowed and what is not allowed. But the beauty with datasets is some of the licenses, one of the famous datasets that I know is CFA10 dataset. And the license says that please cite this paper if you use this dataset. They don't say what is allowed, what is not allowed, or nothing. And many of the datasets that is used to train AI models kind of go with licenses like this, or some custom licenses where the rights or the obligations are not very clear. So the idea of dataset profile is it tries to capture different metadata about the datasets so that all these all the different details can be represented, including bias, the size, the noise that is involved. I know I spoke a little bit about licenses and pivoted to here, but right now, this problem that I described about there being non-standard licenses cannot necessarily be solved just by the SPDX dataset profile alone. But SPDX, the profile has a relationship type called declared license and concluded license. So the idea that we have is these datasets have these strange licenses. And once we are able to trace the lineage of the dataset, which can be captured through some of the fields that are present here, I will go through that. And once the lineage is traced, we can have all the individual licenses identified. And the concluded license field can be used to represent the final license that should apply to the dataset. So the dataset collection process captures how the dataset was collected. So that will kind of give an idea of what is the lineage of the dataset and how the different licenses can be captured. And the intended use will help ratify if the final license and the intended use of the dataset is in concordance. And some of the other fields that are relevant to compliance and relevant to license checks here are like sensitive personal information again. What is the confidentiality level of the dataset? And if it's highly confidential, how it can be used in different scenarios? And what is the bias that is present there? And the other elements are traceability, transparency, and understanding of the whole thing. And while I presented this, if any of you who are working on the AI space could probably ask me, why not just use model cards, or why not just use data sheets or fact sheets? One of the key advantages here is SPDX profiles. SPDX by itself lends itself to automation, and it can represent the whole software. And most of these existing model cards or data sheets are focused on transparency and reproducibility, not necessarily traceability or auditability. And that is where these profiles lend a key advantage. And yeah, some of the future profiles that are planned for SPDX 3.1 and so on is there is going to be a safety profile where we are trying to understand how to represent the safety critical aspects. There's going to be a software as a service profile, and finally a hardware profile that kind of captures what infrastructure the given software is going to be running on. And because now all of these are profiles, depending on how comprehensive the SBOM needs to be versus how minimal the SBOM needs to be, different profiles can be added. So that's my spiel.
Okay, thank you very
you.
much.
Yeah, I have a question. You can see you have very minimum elements, right? And you can be we analyze the software. You can goes to component, goes to file, and goes to snippet.
Yeah.
SPDX. So you can on the website you can see it's very short message which delivered by a SPDX file. But if you created one, you could make it very, very large, right?
Yeah.
Megabytes. So I don't know normally what kind of, or how to say, how big information should be provided in SPDX.
So you can have it as minimally as you want. Like, so the SPDX Lite profile in particular
Yes.
is designed for that, where the idea is to have only the minimal fields. And
Yes.
even in all of these profiles, there are two types of fields. One is required and
Yes.
one is optional.
Okay.
So the required fields are the minimal elements. So you can keep it as small as you want, but if you want the whole traceability, all the details captured, you can make it as comprehensive as you want. So it really depends on how you want to write your SBOM rather than what SPDX asks you to.
Okay.
I guess there's one way of saying it that it really depends on what your procurement contract says. You know, if
Yeah,
your
okay.
customer company is like, just give me the minimum required fields of SPDX Lite,
Yeah.
that's all you need. There's no real right answer except what does the contract you need to fulfill say.
So that means if your customer
Yeah.
they want how many information
Yes,
is
you
delivered
put it
that
in.
he want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So SPDX Lite comes out of Japan, and the Japanese companies have many small suppliers, and a lot of the small suppliers use Excel spreadsheets and very limited fields.
Yes.
So the Japanese multinationals had a choice: try to get the suppliers to become more sophisticated, or try to make a minimal set that can just be tags in spreadsheets, and then the Japanese large company automation can pull out.
Okay.
So it really depends on the customer companies and your supply chain.
Okay, I understand. So because we create SCA, so I don't know, maybe this can be optional for customer to want to create
Sure.
SPDX.
I mean, if you're creating a tool, my suggestion would be try to support all of the ISO standard.
Yeah,
And
okay.
that means your customer can have the scaling, because maybe one customer only needs very minimal. They only need SPDX Lite, but another customer needs a lot.
Yeah.
Like if you're Bosch and you're talking to Toyota, a tier 1 to a automotive, it's likely Toyota will expect a lot from you. So the automation you use will have to provide a lot. So I think an SCA provider support the ISO standard, and that will be enough for many different customer types. If you only support a limited amount, that will be limiting your customer base.
Yeah, sure.
Also, to add to that answer, it also depends where you're going to be doing the business too.
Yeah.
Like if you're going to be doing it in US, then at least these fields, and different countries may have different requirements.
Right.
And that needs to be sometimes taken into consideration too.
By the way, I found something really, really important. I've got Lotus's laptop. Hey. And she's changed it from ThinkPad to say Think Open Atom. Isn't that cool? Okay, sorry.
Sorry, I had to come here to present the slides.
Yeah, the US, the NTIA minimal requirements of a
Yeah.
software bill of materials. NTIA created a definition in the US of minimal elements of an SBOM. And a lot of that was Alan Friedman working on that. And he's now at CISA, Cyber Infrastructure Security Agency, I think. We had lunch in Tokyo a couple of weeks ago. And Alan told me that what the US NTIA defined as minimal elements, he hopes is useful all around the world. And his goal, all of the people working on this, their goal is to try to find the minimum elements that everyone needs. So having stuff like this, it's not intended to be perfect, but it's intended to try to say, if I'm a government, what's the minimum stuff I really want? And they're always thinking about the next version. Alan was going around different places in Asia to say hi and to learn. So we should regard this as useful. The US has done something. The people behind it, like Alan, are very open to discussion. Maybe in Japan or China, we want something else. Maybe we want more, maybe we want less. We can do that. We should do that. And we can also talk with the other countries and share notes. And this cool stuff, the future, things like AI and having options, I think is going to be useful. I mean, the minimum requirements is really software focused. And now we've got all kinds of new stuff.
Yeah, Alan actually wrote an article. Yeah.
He didn't mention that at lunch. By the way, did you know that everyone just calls Alan Mr. S-Bomb? Because he won't stop talking about it.
Mr. S-Bomb.
I did not know that.
I thought they were kidding. Someone told me that, and then I talked to other people from other countries, and they're like, "Oh yeah, Mr. S-Bomb." Yeah, but yeah, I mean, Alan is obviously going to be interested in AI, and I've been talking with LFAI and data, the OpenChain AI study group. They had their kickoff meeting this morning, right at 4:30 a.m.
Yeah.
You were there. I was asleep. So we're going to have a high-level AI study group, and on the implementation side, the tracking side, AI and data is being implemented. And as I understand it, SPDX 3.0 is just about finished, but 3.1 is now.
We are speaking of profile for large language model and foundation model software
in
as
3.1.
in 3.1. So we just started the working group. So if anyone's interested, we will hopefully have a SPDX FM profile in the next version.
And what's really cool is that, I mean, SPDX is an open project doing an open standard. We can check if we like this or not, and expand it, even change it, whatever we need to do as a global community. The good news is that obviously Gopi has been working deeply on this. You run AI, right? And the China market. So I think this is probably already going to be useful in China, the AI and data approach, because it comes from the knowledge of companies like Huawei. I'm very happy to see this. And I mean, OpenChain is much more at the beginning, because we're looking at the very high level business thing. We're not even sure if we'll make a standard, but we're thinking, what business process do you need that would then require your AI bill of material, your data bill of material? And the reason this is all important to everyone, and this is why I showed the CRA earlier, the Cyber Resiliency Act was early drafts, an absolute train wreck for open source. And it's not because my dear European Union citizen compatriots are not educated. They're extremely well educated at the Commission and so on. But they're not open source people. They had no idea how to approach this thing. So they thought open source, non-commercial, excluded. But what does that mean? What happens when you have a project funded by multinationals? Would they say that's non-commercial or commercial? It was very scary. And it got a lot better with the CRA over time. But it started as a train wreck. And we have to be ahead of policy. We have to build structures or policy will be made for us. Cyber Resiliency Act happened because it had to happen, but the industry was far too slow to make coherent approaches for reporting, to make standards. In the case of AI, our duty is to make the standards to protect the market, to make reporting and management clear. So when policymakers decide to make legislation and regulation going into detail on AI, they will look at our standards. They will understand it from our perspective. And this is why this work is important. You probably know the European Union just passed some regulation on AI as well. They're just starting. There will be more. And this work, which will, is it SPDX 3.0 or 3.1 that'll become ISO standard?
I think 3.0 will become ISO standard.
So this will begin to give something, when we have an ISO standard, we can put it on the desk of a commission official and say, I know you're about this. Here's the international standard about how we do it. Please look at that. And that helps avoid things like early CRA. And I've been working in this field for 20 years, again and again and again and again. As an industry, we failed to regulate ourselves, and then people regulated us for us. Now, I actually like regulation. I think it's very important, but I think it's important that regulation is based on deep knowledge of an industry. So anyway, the reason this is important isn't just if you're shipping AI today. It's because this will help shape government policies and regulations. And OpenChain's AI study group, if it becomes a work group, if it makes a standard, that will also help shape the market. So you're way ahead on this. You've been working on this for ages.
Yeah,
So,
like for a few years.
yeah, which is good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I do have OpenChain. There are some processes that are already
Useful,
that needs to
right?
be done and could become part of OpenChain at some point too, I think.
Well, we have
Yeah.
to sync up on this.
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest with you, and this is secret, he says, recording it. In our AI idea, when we looked at it, someone made a really good point, and then other people made it too. AI is so new, we haven't properly scoped it. There's many parts. You've got models, you've got data sets, you've got the large language model, then you've got general AI. There's all different things, and sometimes people are talking about different things. How do you manage that? So that's why we have a study group, because for the business process side, we're not yet ready to define the problem. We're just starting.
I actually think now that you bring it up, this has been a pet peeve of mine, and I've tried to do this in the working group. I wanted to name this SPDX ML, not AI.
Because yes, it's very much on machine language. Yes.
Machine learning, right? So yes, I completely understand. And I think when it moves to the next stage where we have a profile for large language models, I think I'll bring this up again and see if it goes up the chain.
That's right. The machine learning and large language models are very different creatures.
Yeah, like machine learning, large language model, and AI in general, I think all different levels, right?
Yeah.
And talk about here, I'm thinking about we regulate on the process and the code and on the data set, but actually government are afraid of the results. Results is not good, right? But different model, different code use different data, may create different results. So how to control this, and it goes to the results they want.
Well, I mean, I feel confident that once we have a more mature field, we'll do a lot better. A lot of the data sets, and forgive me if I'm incorrect, a lot of the data sets are randomly created from massive amounts of data borrowed from the internet. So of course, they're not constrained. I suspect rather than saying I have 200 trillion pieces of data, we're going to have much more scoped data sets and therefore more predictable parameters or safeguards. Because right now, a lot of the like large language model stuff is borderline lunatic level. I'll give you an example, a really practical example. Our OpenChain German work group, one of our members, decided to do some research with ChatGPT. And with ChatGPT 3, he asked it about open source licenses in China. and it explained 4 different types of open source license in China. The license, the organization that created it, the reason it created it. Only one was real, Mulan. The rest was hallucination. So, we said, well, that's a lunatic machine. And then we tried Japan, 5 types of license, none of which are real. So yeah, large language models are great, but people forget they don't know what language is. They're predicting the next word. That's all. So
I think that's where the dataset profile will itself come in very handy.
yes.
Because one of the functions of so if the LLM has seen that data set enough in its training data, then it would be able to do a good job usually. So if it's a question about North America, maybe it would be able to do a good job because it would have seen large
Yes.
amounts of the data. And having the data set profile explain the data sets that it has seen, especially, it would really help to help for someone to go into a chat GPT and say, can I use this particular model for my particular work? And there will be a place that one can look up to see if that happens.
That's a good point. A lot of AI right now is basically Stack Overflow. People are grabbing stuff randomly and hoping for the best.
Yeah.
So we do need to manage it. And you raised an interesting point. Is AI dangerous? I think the answer is no, it's just chaos.
I think about AI. At least 3 legal questions. The first one is about the copyright of the
Yeah.
code generated by AI. Yeah.
Yes.
The second is about the different licensing mode, because
Yes.
just you said, software is different from data set, from the models. From the way, yeah, they are
Yes.
totally different. I don't know, in data set is not protected by software, by copyright.
Right.
They are protected by either unfair competition or trade secrets. Yeah, this is the second question about how to authorize, how to give enough authorize, because I think according to normal license, it is not enough. Yeah, because for data set, for models, they are different.
Yes.
Another question, the third question is about it's called ethics clauses. Yeah, responsible clauses. Apart from open, another half about license, about open source license is responsible.
Yeah.
Just as in the real license, yeah, real license. About these 3 questions, I will write a article in CSBN, New Programmer. I think in our legal community, I think these 3 questions is we should pay much attention to it.
That's a really
Yeah,
good
at least
point.
these 3 questions. Yeah.
And there's some huge differences between areas. You mentioned about data sets not being protected in China, I believe. And in Europe, it's totally the opposite. There's a specific legislation for databases.
Yeah.
And in Latin civil law countries, there's something called authorship, which means you cannot give a public domain database. It's always authored. And this is where I think actually there's a lot of conversation about what the US is doing on AI, but I think there's a huge conversation to be had between China and the EU, both areas very much advanced in China, relatively new in Europe, but both very concerned about how do we manage AI effectively? And it's a slightly different type of market to the US. So I know in the European Union, one of the main questions with AI is recognition that it's chaos, recognition that maybe we can control transmission of it with bill of materials, maybe we can manage business processes, but how do we, as you mentioned, also make sure that the consequences of AI are good. And this is, a lot of stuff to do. It'll take us years, but we'll work together on it.
Actually, for the first question that you asked, recently US had a ruling that if you create art with AI, it's not necessarily protected by copyright.
That's right.
So, but there's a if you create art with AI,
Yeah.
the created art is not protected.
The created art,
Yeah,
The art
code,
is,
yeah, the
no,
code
no, no,
generated.
art.
not the code. They didn't speak about yeah
Paints
the
or-
painting, picture.
And also, there is a case in US already, that somebody sued GitHub, sued
Yes.
Microsoft.
Yeah.
And also sued OpenAI.
For-
Yeah.
It's about,
Code.
you know,
Yes.
they said, okay, the model is trained by open source software. But how to comply with the open source license, and how to protect the copyright of the generated code. It is already a case.
So
But no final result yet.
yeah,
But they already in such a case. And also, I think maybe this something, but also different from the art, from the paint or the some paints or the poem, such as, because software, you know, software even in US law, software is apart from art, also there is a functional, because software is functional.
no, I completely agree. Like the only important thing that I wanted to kind of bring into attention was when they came up with this law or came up with the ruling that art is not protected by copyright. The person tried to argue that, and what the judge said was, if you can show me exactly what parts of the art has the creative expression that is directly linked from the person's creative expression and what part is not, then those specific parts can actually be protected. But it's not possible to do so, right? So that's why it's not protected. So I have my intuition is something similar might occur to software also, because a lot of and interestingly, Microsoft recently said something like, if Copilot generates code and if someone is suing, given certain conditions are met,
Unlimited.
Microsoft will take the responsibility and they will fight. So I think that those all lean to a specific direction of how this ruling is going to go,
Absolutely.
right?
And I have good news. We're gonna have Microsoft's team, GitHub's team, talking about this precise topic in January. We're
Oh.
gonna have a big OpenChain webinar on exactly this point.
I want to attend that.
Yeah, it's gonna be cool.
Yeah.
But it's gonna be it's gonna be debated for a while. We're gonna have a lot of lawsuits and we're gonna have a lot of conflict. But you know, quite frankly, Chinese leadership on this topic will be vital. The models have been used here for a long time already. So I think a lot of people are listening, and especially my impression is in the EU, there'll be a lot of very similar questions on how do we manage this and why. Yeah, and as I said, we'll have the Americans coming to talk in detail with GitHub in OpenChain webinar series. But it's a big one.
Also, I think there's so there's a researcher who works on software licenses and called Daniel German. He has a paper. I think he's working like the last time I met him in a conference, he was working on similar research questions, almost exactly the same questions that you were saying. So it is very open right now. Yeah.
I want to ask a very technical question about SA field, software component analysis. And according to your introduction of the SPDX future version, will the SA truth will generate a signature of each open source model files, including currently the most used framework is PyTorch framework, and the open source AI model will include PY files and JSON file, and the most important is the bin file. And will the SPDX will generate a signature for each open source bin file?
I believe so. Especially right now, the core profile and the software profile all have capabilities to generate checksum. So you can have a checksum for each of the file.
So the AI version, the future version of the SBOM file will have a signature of the bin file.
I have to get back to you on that because maybe I'm not 100% sure. I'm not 100% sure.
I'm not an AI expert, but currently I have a business scenario, and if one of my AI team in my company use open source AI model and make some modification, make some training using our private data, and made some slides change on the bin file. Could the bin file still be traceability to the upstream bin file?
Well, it really depends how someone recorded it. I mean,
Yeah.
we'll have to check if there's going to be
Yeah,
signing.
this
But
is
we'll get back
about
to
the copy, the intellectual property of the bin file. If I just make some, do some private training, use my own data, but the upstream bin file is the open source bin file. Then I generate a new version of bin file.
Yeah.
Then can I trace the bin file to the upstream?
You should be able to, I think.
you're talking about a derivative work.
Yeah,
Yes, this is right.
Yeah, it should be possible.
should be possible. Like I think I think it will be done through checksums.
Yeah.
So let me just find it.
If I do my private training, then the checksum will be changed.
Yes. So
Yeah.
to be clear, it's a different work, but then if we do any analysis of it, we'll find the similarities.
But still, the bin file is just a single file, so can
So, but if you're changing the bin file, the MD5 will change, right?
Yeah.
yes.
So if the MD5 will change, you have an SBOM profile that is already, you have an SPDX profile that is already available. And now that you have changed some things,
Yes.
you have a new SPDX profile.
But
And now you'll have a difference between them, right?
yes, but what I'm concerned is that I need to know the upstream bin file.
Is to have a linking between to the upstream or record of it.
Yes. Recently, there's a controversial.
That's a 93% match with Llama. So I mean, I get where you're coming from, and maybe we need to consider a way to link it in an SBOM, which is
Yeah.
why he's taking notes.
Yeah. I'm gonna talk with a few people because I'm not entirely certain how to answer that.
But I mean, we'll definitely catch
Yeah.
you if you're doing that, because someone will just do an analysis and
Right
find
now-
the similarities.
Versioning SBOMs is the way that I think this could be addressed. Say, for example, if Meta Llama has a SBOM, right?
Yes.
And you create something and you will have an SBOM. Can you say if that was derived from this? Probably not, right now, as it stands. But you can probably say that the file that you generated and the file that the Meta has will be different. But I do not know if someone has an upstream like that, can the similarity be found?
Will this written to the SPDX standard?
Yeah, he's running that AI part. He just wrote it down.
I'll just
You did it.
quiet. How to do it like this? I'll bring this up in the working.
I I just know the normal share. I translate with you the inner source document. And you are SC vendor. What was your plan of the scenario you just talked about? That's the traceability of the bin file.
Well, I have no idea. Actually, if because if you see the bin file as also a kind of articles, right? You have something similar to the open source, something not, right? So it's you can see the full work may be a directive work is another work, but if you also say, I think this should be decided by some lawyer. Maybe. It depends on. I'm not quite sure.
Well, we can definitely say the good news is that a memo has been made and it's going to the steering group. So the gap you've potentially raised has now been put into a process by pencil, but soon to be
And I will-
digital.
I will talk to you, I'll connect with you offline more to understand more details, and I'll definitely bring this up in the working group.
That's awesome. And now, I'm sorry, everyone, we're basically out of time. But we've been so fortunate today, not only to have you here, but to have Gopi come along. Because AI is the hottest topic. It is something that OpenChain will be working on. But on the practical side, today, you can begin managing your AI with SPDX AI profile and SPDX data profile. And what's doing that right now is not an ISO standard, but it will become an update to the ISO standard. So right now, because of the hard work of people like Gopi, companies like Huawei, you can start doing AI management. And on the very high business process standard level, we're opening the discussion, and you're very welcome to be part of it, where we decide if we make a sister standard to license compliance and security assurance. Gosh, everyone, it's been so good to have you here, and I'm sorry that we didn't have time to cover more topics. I mean, we touched on how cooperation will be so important. You know, we need to have the voice of the Chinese companies expressing the knowledge of this market to the companies in places like the European Union. We need to have better bridges between China, Japan, and Korean companies to share notes. We all have the same challenge on open source, and we will fix it together, as we always do. I'm so happy that, you know, we had Gao Shu from CAICT talk today. Thank you for coming. I know you're so busy. Thank you for coming. And Lotus from Open Atom, and I have her laptop. You know, what you've presented today is super important as a market snapshot, and also we're already talking about the future. Obviously, we need to do more. We will have a conference next year, and that conference will be designed to have short presentations, many different speakers, and a lot more networking. So we will solve that, and we'll try and drag this guy back too. I'm waving my finger at Gopi in case you're online.
I'll try my very best.
All right, everyone. Thank you very much. Big hand for yourselves. Okay, those online, thank you very much and have a beautiful day. Oh, a photo. That's a great idea. We're going to take a photo. Chris! Oh my God, I was saying such bad things about you. I hope you weren't online. I'm going to put the logo thing up. Chris, how are things going? I still haven't got to Chengdu. I want to see the pandas. My life has been so busy. And you need to move Chengdu closer to Japan. It currently takes 9 hours to get there. All right, photo time. Should we all? Yeah. Oh, let me put this one. Let me put the opening slide up. There we go. Look at that. The company logos and everything.
Your name, what should we call your name? How's the